The question for the day is, how many days should you wait to work out after your most recent workout? And why do we wait that many days? Essentially, what we're asking ourselves here is, how do we evaluate training readiness for each workout? When we're writing programs, we take into account your goals, your schedule, how much time you're able to commit to the gym, and maybe to some extent your recovery capacity. And we'll recommend and write programs across a mesocycle, which for us is a 4-week program. And in that mesocycle is a microcycle, and usually of 1 week. And that's pretty much how most programs are written, usually across 1 full week of time. And you'll say, I'm going to work out twice, or I'm going to work out 3 times, and those are going to be full body workouts, or I'm going to work out 4 times, and I'm going to do an upper day, and then a lower body day, and then another upper body day, and another lower body day. There's a lot of different ways we can split things up, but one of the things we take into account is training readiness between each session. And that depends on things like how many days you're coming in, but also how they're spaced apart. Because spacing certain days apart makes more sense depending on what we've done in the previous days and what we're looking to do in the next workout. Training readiness is really just your ability to put forth a good effort. And there are 2 main factors. The first one is the mental side of training readiness. And this is just your ability to focus and neurologically drive effort in your exercise session. The second is physical training readiness. And this is how your body actually feels. Now, the big thing is both mental and physical training readiness are driven a lot and affected by the overall stress on our system being the body. So when we go through maybe really difficult periods of stressful time at work, or maybe we're in a really intense exercise program, both our mental and our physical training readiness might be a little bit lower every day. And in fact, when we look across maybe a 4-week cycle, baked into that cycle is usually some sort of increasing effort as we go. And that fatigue that you build over time, if we're pushing to a certain extent, that fatigue will actually decrease your training readiness. So you might actually be better on week 1 than you feel on week 4 because you fatigue over time. And for some programs, that's just how it goes. So let's talk about the factors that affect mental training readiness. Again, this is just our ability to focus and neurologically drive effort. Some of the big things that are affected by mental training readiness are like power exercises, things where we need to be explosive, max strength exercises, max effort in general. So that could be something like sprinting or just competing. Doing things like competing in a lifting competition or a CrossFit competition or a run are incredibly demanding, and they require all of our focus and effort. So what affects our mental training readiness? Well, one of the big things is recent workouts. That's a big one because when we have very recently put out a lot of effort, it takes our body time to recover from that max effort. So that excited state, that neurological drive to do something, like I said, compete, or maybe just do a max effort day where you squat or you bench press really heavy. Your body needs time to mentally recover as much as physically recover. And in fact, in a lot of cases, the physical recovery actually isn't as bad as the mental recovery. And so typically for most people, the guidelines that we have now are probably somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. That is a good rule of thumb, 48 I think being the most common, between our heaviest workouts, the ones that just require the most focus. There are other things that affect your mental training readiness as well, because mental training readiness can be as simple as having low motivation. And things that can affect your motivation might be, again, maybe just stressful periods of time outside of the gym. It could have to do with something like work. It could also have to do with your nutrition, where if you're going through a period of dieting, you might find that your mental motivation is a lot lower, and it's just harder to get yourself up and really drive a good workout. It could also be sleep. You don't sleep for maybe the night before, or maybe you've had an extended period of disrupted sleep. You're also going to probably have trouble keeping yourself motivated and really driven. And so that's what affects our mental training readiness. Our physical training readiness is actually how well recovered we are, not just from the previous workout, but from all of the previous workouts and all of the physical activity that we've been doing in our recent history. This is what we mean too when we say that across a program, you might find that you become a little more sore and a little more stiff because with each workout, each successive workout, as we build workouts on top of one another and we create this system where we're not recovering maybe 100%, what happens is, we're 100% on week 1, maybe 99% on week 2. By week 4, we're at like 96% and we don't feel quite as good, but we're close. How do we evaluate physical training readiness? This one I think is a little bit simpler. It is affected by the same things. It's affected by your overall stress load. That could be all of the previous workouts combined. That could be stress at work, which is not just physical. It could be sleep, not sleeping well, having disrupted sleep patterns. It could also be nutrition, not recovering well because you're just not eating enough to support the activity you're doing, which includes not just gym activity, but also things like the extra activity you do just walking around, doing yard work in the fall or shoveling snow or whatever else you're doing. The best way I think for us to evaluate physical training readiness really is probably to sort of try to objectively evaluate how we feel. Things like soreness from previous workouts can be a good indicator that we're not fully recovered. That, of course, isn't always true because if we just did a workout where we did a very, very new exercise, sometimes that soreness will linger for a little bit longer, but soreness could be a little bit of a proxy for physical readiness. So if you're really sore from a previous workout, you might want to give it another day. Going back to the idea of building fatigue throughout a program, what you might find is as you go through a program or you go through some weeks of working out, what you might find is a buildup of stiffness and maybe even pain. And this isn't necessarily because you've injured something. It's just that over time, things have become stiff because they've not quite recovered from all the previous workouts and all the previous work you've done. So the tough thing with physical training readiness is we need to find some way to evaluate it objectively. But I think the best thing we have right now is how we feel physically. That should give us a little bit of an indication. For most people, the days or time, we said before, 24, 48 hours for that mental readiness to really come back. I think the best guideline we have now is usually we're talking 2 or 3 days between workouts for physical readiness to really come back. And for most people, that's when soreness will start to subside, is usually at that 3-day mark. Now, it's important to know that we don't only write programs according to these specific guidelines. We write programs according to what we want your training readiness to be for future workouts. So if we are looking at you and you're training on Monday and then you're also training on Wednesday, our goal is to write a workout on Monday that allows you to come back on Wednesday and feel good physically and feel good mentally. And so that will involve some manipulation of different variables to make sure you do feel good on Wednesday. So there really is no special guideline to how many days between workouts you need to create. There is really no rule of thumb because the less work you did in a previous workout, the less recovery time you need for the next one, and vice versa. And so when it comes to both mental and physical training readiness, the thing to remember is that we design programs with those things in mind. And so the real factor that we need to consider here is not so much how many days between workouts, but how much total work do we need to do to build strength or build our cardiovascular fitness or to build muscle. And then what we can do is we can look and say, across maybe a microcycle, across a week, how much work do we need to fit into that week? And then we design it based on the personal variables that a person brings. Like I said, if you work out Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday all in a row, it may seem not ideal, but it's better than working out Monday, skipping to Wednesday, and then just avoiding that third day altogether because you don't have time. Instead, what we can do is we can program those 3 days to look a little bit different so that we are prepared and we feel good all 3 days, both mentally and physically. The key with fitness is that all of the little physiological processes that happen in our body that help us improve as a result of the stress of a workout, those things are happening at all times, regardless of your training readiness. Our goal is not necessarily to create a graph that is workout, recovery, workout, recovery. Our goal is to net recover over time and to net build a more resilient, a stronger version of ourselves. And so what matters less is how many days we have between workouts, but more how much total work are we doing? And then we can take that and design workouts that accommodate your personal schedule. But if you are on a little bit of a flexible schedule, training readiness might matter. Giving yourself a day or two break between your really heavy, your really driven, neurologically driven, big efforts is important. And if you're still sore from the previous workout, and you have the ability to flex your workouts around, it might make sense to push it off another day and maybe choose something different for that day. And that way we can manipulate those variables and keep you moving forward and improving without sort of driving you into this ultra fatigue state because we tried to adhere to a schedule that maybe wasn't working at the time. Most importantly, because your recovery is based not just on the workouts we do, but it's based on all kinds of things. Like I said, nutrition, sleep, and extra stress and activity. And so that's basically it. Mental and physical training readiness are really, really important. And so when we're designing programs, we try to design programs that allow us to consider those factors for the individual person and for their schedule.